Welcome to my sixth video for the second chapter of our ActionRPG in Unity. And this video is going to be very coding heavy because we're going to code the ranged attack fireball. We're only going to do a basic, you click the right mouse button and it travels towards that direction. And then there'll be some optional videos following this that sets up the system for charging the fireball to get 3 different effects out of it. So let's dive into the code. On the last video, we just finished making prefabs for each of these fireballs. And so if you missed any of the settings, here are our fireballs. The main thing being is that we need to have some kind of collider. You can actually do capsule or circle or polygon. We have a kinematic rigid body, and we have the animation correctly set up. And that's actually true for all the different fireballs that we have here. All right. And if you were constructing the other fireballs, like the fireball level 2, you can pause the video and take a look at the settings that I have here, and then you can use those settings as well. And so here's the fireball level 3. Not much different, just slightly different collider settings. The animations for those, if you want to pause the video here, you can see the time indexes I use. Every 15 ticks, I have a different frame for the level 3. The impact is right here. Every 10 ticks. The level 2 fireball, every 12 ticks, I have a new frame on travel, and on impact, every 9 ticks, I have a new frame. So let's go and start to code the ability to launch a fireball. All of these things animate. They don't do anything yet, but we want the player to be able to start throwing some fire. So we're going to go back into the player script, and we need to start creating some variables that pertain to my ranged attack. So underneath melee attack, let's add some more variables. So I'm going to start with a public game object called ranged projectile. That's going to be what we attach fireball level 1 to so that it can spawn it. Then we're going to need a public integer for range damage. Spell damage right. And I'm going to start it off with a 5. So it's half the strength of a sword swing. Public int ranged mana cost. Let's go with 15. So it's going to take that much mana to use. And then we need to start creating the public float ranged attack cooldown. That's going to be, let's go a little bit higher, so maybe like 0.4. So that slightly higher than the melee attack cooldown. We're good. Now leave it 0.4. We can always drop it later. And then I guess while we're kind of beginning to think about this, we need to start thinking about like a mana regeneration rate. So a public float mana per second, and that'll be 0.5. And I need a counter to track my mana. Private float mana regenerate ticker. This one's going. The mana regeneration is actually kind of a clever approach. So we're going to ideally regain about 5 mana per second. Let's go with 10. I think I have 10 in my other sample. And then we've got some of our basic settings here. The only one that's kind of questionable is the range damage, and that's probably because it's going to end up on the projectile. So that's a little questionable. Like, we could always manually force a damage set inside of here, but it is on the projectile, so that's the only one that I'm kind of calling into a little bit of question here. So let's go into the start. Now, the way I'm actually going to do mana regeneration is I'm going to calculate what fraction of a second it would take to get 10 mana back. So if I'm going to get 10 mana per second, that means that every 10th of a second I would get 1 mana. So we're going to update this mana regenerate ticker, and inside of attack settings we're going to say mana regenerate ticker is equal to 1 divided by the mana per second. Now, if I was caring about efficiency, I probably should make a separate variable for this, so I'm not sitting here recalculating a division because I'm going to recalculate every time the mana ticks. I could probably think of ways to make that a little bit more efficient, but for the sake of simple coding, I'm going to keep this. So that brings me to the update method. And the update method, I do want to do a little bit of cleaning here because this has been getting very hectic. So let's start with an update get inputs. And you'll see that it is mad. I actually want to move these different commands. I want to move all of my vector to mouse world position, all of this. I want to just take these 4 lines with the comment, cut that, and I'm going to go write a input get up inputs. And right under here. So right under update cooldowns, I'm going to make a new public void update get inputs. And I'm going to put those there. And I just have my comment there so that I can remember what this does. Hit save. Now I'm going to shrink that. So all I've got to worry about is my update get inputs. And then I want to make another one for update animations. And I want to move all the things pertaining to my animations there. So I'm going to put these together, the send info to animator and the facing the mouse. I'm going to cut those, and I'm going to go make a new method called update animations. So the public void update animations, and I'm going to paste those things that I previously had there. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to shrink this function. The reason I'm doing this is because it helps manage the appearance of my method here. I'm going to leave this in there for now. Eventually that's going to get deleted, but for now I'll leave it until we get to the enemy stage where we can start putting enemies in. And I could probably have shoved that into the animations, but I'm kind of fine where it is. Alright, so we got our player attacks right here. And even though I'm going to leave this here for now, I may end up moving it during the extra videos. But let's jump into getting the ranged attack. So let's go check for ranged attack. And we're going to do another similar check as we did for this. I'm going to switch this to get button up. So when you release the mouse, it shoots the fireball. So you kind of like target it, and then when you let go, it actually fires it. So again, when you're not attacking and when your attack cooldown ticker is 0, you're able to do this. I think we probably also need to check mana too. And mana.current value is greater than or equal to ranged mana cost. So we also need to make sure that the player has enough mana to attack with. So we want to send the animation trigger called cast. And we'll set is attacking true because the player is going to be standing in that hand forward casting animation for a little bit. Then we need to actually just spawn my fireball. So let's do what we kind of did for the melee attack. We're going to float angle. We're going to use the arc tangent again. ATAN2. I always forget what that's called. And we want to use the 2mouse.y, comma 2mouse.x. If you forget, if you just mouse over arctan2, it tells you the order. Y comes first, then x. It's because in the fraction of arctangent, you put y over x. It's probably why it's like that. So we calculate the angle, and then we need to spawn the projectile. And so we're going to say game object attempt fireball equals instantiates ranged projectile at my position, transform.position. And then we're going to rotate it with a quaternion dot Euler angle. So like what we did with the melee attack. So very similar, actually, almost identical instantiation that we did there. So we spawn the fireball. Then we need to deduct mana. So my mana.current value will be minus equal ranged mana cost. We need to, well, we'll call update UI at the end of all this. And I believe that's all we need to worry about for now. I think we set everything up. Okay, so this should make the fireball appear. Now, we haven't coded the fireball actually moving yet, so we will have to go and do that. We'll call update UI here. So let's hit save. And so we've got my ranged attack set up right here. We need to then worry about mana regeneration, but let's see if this works. So we'll minimize that. We'll jump back into Unity. It's going to recompile. And we need to check, we need to attach in the player prefab, rather, down here, let's go and set the ranged projectile. It's currently set to none. So I'm going to drag and drop fireball level 1 into there. And let's take a look. Let's hit play. And you can see, well, my fireball made me stuck. So I know why I'm stuck. So while it is spawning the fireball, I'm still stuck in is attacking. And so because of is attacking, I'm not actually getting a chance to move again. So let's see if the player actually goes into that animation too. Yes, so we can see the player does point their finger, but I get stuck because I never get set out of is attacking true. So let's go have the player dismiss us from attacking. And that's going to be open up the player prefab, go into the animation, and then choose our cast animations. And right here at the end, let's add an animation event that goes and triggers end attack animation. So on the 15, I add an end attack animation event. And I have to do that for all 4 of them. Make sure I got that right. Yeah. So that all those now have end attack animation. And so now when I go back into here, I should be able to shoot a fireball again. Like I shoot one, and then I can move again. I don't think I'm rotating it right though. And my mana's not regenerating, so I don't get to spawn new ones. Well, let's make sure that my sword slashes are appearing correct. So let's see if there's something I did wrong with my... Oh, I forgot to convert it from radians to degrees. So I need to, on my angle, multiply by math.f radians 2 degrees. So, because it was, yeah, I was putting the angle in here as a, as radians. That's not how Euler angles work. So, with that change, my fireball should be behaving now. So you can see that it points in the direction that I was aiming. And my character kind of has this animation for when they cast. Might be, I don't know, may be worth slowing that thing down, but I'll do that off camera. So I might tweak the speeds, but it does seem a little fast. All right, so we've got the fireball appearing, and we need to do mana on the player, then we can start setting up the fireball. So let's go and do some mana. I'm going to handle that during this update cooldowns method, because the whole point of doing all these little methods is to keep update as clean as possible. It keeps update from getting cluttered. So let's jump down to update cooldowns, and it's over here. So I've got my attack ticker, but in addition to that, I should probably be doing mana. So if I am not attacking, so essentially the player's mana stops regenerating while they're attacking. Mana regenerate ticker minus equal time dot delta time. And then if it hits 0, so if mana regenerate ticker is less than or equal to 0, then we get 1 mana. So if mana dot current value is less than mana dot max value, mana dot current value plus equals 1. So obviously I'm making sure that I'm at like 99 and then I add 1 more in. Otherwise, so this would basically just mean that I'm at max mana, and I'm adding this line in case we ever decide to change the mana regenerate so that you can get like double regeneration. So then if you're at the max value, it stays at the max value. And then we reset the timer. So mana regenerate ticker is set equal to 1 divided by mana per second. And then we will update the UI because we just changed my mana. So we're adding this mana regeneration to the update cooldowns so that it kind of gets called anytime I call my other cooldown type stuff. So that is our code there. If you need to pause the video to make sure that yours matches, do so. And let's go test it. I'm going to minimize this because now inside of update cooldowns it is managing mana too. And you can see my mana is recharging up there. So if you feel like that rate is too fast, you know, you can always slow it down. But I actually have that rate in mind because I do plan on allowing the player to charge up their fireballs, which will cost more. So I'm going to leave it at 10 for now because I like how fast it fills. You may adjust that rate if needed. So now we need to script the fireball to move. So I think that's going to make sense that it goes into the player folder here. Create another C# script called player fireball. It's tempted just to call it fireball, but should be specific because I'm sure that more than one thing's in a action RPG is going to have a fireball. Okay, so this is where we're going to set up a lot of the stats for the fireball. So let's start with a move speed. Let's go with a default of 8. Obviously, we can change that later. Then let's do a level. Now, the default level for the fireball is 1. If you do the other video, you will see other levels of fireballs. Let's go with the damage of 5. A knockback of 3. We'll add impacts. So impacts left indicates when we start putting enemies in, if we want to have fireballs pierce targets, that's what this impacts is going to do. If we increase that number, we can increase the number of things it can pierce through. And add some tooltips here. And then so, got some settings here. Just some descriptors for all the different parts of the fireball. Now let's start tracking a few things. We're going to need, because I want to track, oh, I need range on here. Okay. And so we need public float range, and that will be how far the fireball can travel. All right, so the internal variables, we definitely need to track its starting position, because if we're going to do a max distance, we need to know where the fireball started. And then if we're going to do piercing, we need to track the things that the fireball has already hit. We need this for the layering, so that it kind of can appear a little bit up higher. And now some movement. I'm including a move modifier just in case we want to interact with that in any way, such as areas where fireballs might get slowed down, projectiles get slowed down. Could be useful to have. We need the rigid body. We need the collider. Now notice I'm actually just using collider 2D, not circle collider, because if I just used collider 2D, it can reference any type of collider you put on the fireball. And so we've got all of our kind of usual suspects here. And then we're going to add one more called, it's a boolean called is active. And we'll start that off as true. So here's all of our variables for the fireball. Actually, quite a lot. So if you missed any, pause here and double check to make sure you've got all of that. So let's start getting the fireball up and running. The start is as predictable as it's going to be. We're basically just going to run through and grab all the components that we need in order to get the fireball to respond to things. So we got all of our components here. Let's just make sure that active is set to true. And we need to document our starting position. Starting position equals my transform.position. Alright, and so that is our start method. We're basically just attaching the components and getting our starting position gathered. So inside of update, we're going to go through and we're going to do the usual thing with we can just actually steal it directly from player. Calculate the layer order. So I'm back over to Fireball. And then let's check to see if we are too far. So and there's a built-in vector2 method called distance, and I can use my transform.position, so my current position, and then comma, the starting position. If that is greater than the range, and the fireball was currently active, we want to run this method that I'm going to write called impact. And it may try, oh, okay, well, we're going to deal with that in a little bit. The autocomplete wants to create it as impacts left. So let's just go and make public void capital I impact. And now here inside of the distance, if the distance is far enough, we're just going to call impact. inside of impact, we're going to tell it to go to set trigger and tell it to run the impact trigger. Now the nice thing, I'm going to reuse this script on all 3 fireballs. All 3 fireballs use the same exact trigger to trigger their impacting animation, so that works out well. And this animation is also going to call the destroy method. So this animation is going to be responsible for cleaning up the fireball. So that also means we need to turn off the colliders and such, because this fireball is going to still stay on the screen. So we're going to say my collider.enable equals false, and we're going to do is active false. So we want to disable my fireball for all gameplay purposes. So the collider is going to disable, so it no longer registers hits with things. And then my own variable called isActive is false, which is going to control my movement. And also it controls this detection, so it doesn't try to send impact commands multiple times. Because it's no longer active, it's not going to even bother with this. Let's make a method here. Method for the animation to call. We're going to call this public void delete. And it is going to run the destroy command. And so the animation is going to call this so that it will clean up and remove this object. Okay, let's get this thing to actually move. So we need fixed update. If it is active, then we're just going to use kind of the simpler move command. We're going to use move position, transform dot position plus transform dot right. Actually, let's calculate it out. Call it vector 2. Call it move amount. And we're going to use transform.right, which is essentially forward times move speed times time.delta time. So we'll move my position plus move amount. So it'll calculate where I need to go. And then we need to cast this as a vector 2, because this is currently a vector 3 trying to be added to a 2-dimensional vector, and it was not happy about that. So right now it's looking pretty good. It's just going to fly until it just runs out of steam. Hit save on this. And I don't have this delete called yet, so what's going to happen is it's going to run out of distance and it's going to play the animation and get stuck there. So if you're missing any parts of this, make sure you pause the video and grab it. But I'm going to attach this to the fireball. So I'm going to attach this player fireball script to player fireball level 1. Alright, so that means, let's hit play. And you can see that fireball took off. And when I shoot them now, they do travel, and they are animated, and they don't delete themselves yet, but they fly around. We need to also start considering hitting things. But we are kind of getting kind of long on this video, but I don't think it'll take that long to wrap it up. So let's go and let's get this to call its own destruction. So inside of the animation, let's go to my fireball prefab, double click it, click on the fireball, and let's add on the impact, right click and add an animation event right at the end here for delete. And so it's going to call the delete method so it cleans itself up. If you have other ones, you could actually add that for all of your different. I don't have the scripts on these yet, so. So you can add the impact or the delete command at the end of each of the fireballs. We're not going to worry about the settings of those fireballs yet. And so the last thing I really need to do is have this thing detect when it has hit a wall. Also want to update my offset here. So I'm adding that into this draw thing. And that means the only thing I'm not using, what variable is it mad about? Move modifier. I'm just going to comment out move modifier. So we need to do our final method called on trigger enter 2D. So you can see the autocomplete version, but it's capital O, capital T, capital E, 2D. This is for detecting when we hit something. So let's go through and detect the only two things that we really can right now. And that is if we hit a doodad, if collision, let's rename this to other. Makes more sense. If other.compare tag is a doodad, then let's get the doodad script. Doodad script equals other dots get components. And if you recall on the doodad script, we had a variable called, or a method called, oh, did we add that method? Let's see. No, we need one. I'm gonna go into the doodad script and add it, and it's called public void is tall. And it's just going to return the variable called block projectiles. Oh, the data type needs to be a Boolean. And so what it's going to do is if we set it to block projectiles, it's going to return true if it is, and I just called it is tall, so it thinks that, you know, it's big enough to block a projectile. So jumping back to here, we'll say if script dot is tall, so if it is true that it is tall, then we're going to call the impact. So we're just going to destroy the fireball there. And then we're going to check to see if the other thing's name contains the word blocking. So that means we hit a blocking high, and in that case, we're also going to call impact. So what this will mean is the barrels and bushes it will fly over, but the trees, which were a tall object, it should not. And then if it hits like the cliffs, it should also, but it'll pass over water. So when I shoot that, it hits the tree line because those are blocking highs, but it passes over water, hits that, passes over the bush, but the tree, because it's considered a tall object, it just impacts on. And so now we've got a relatively smart fireball that only impacts on things that are considered to be tall. Now this is a bit of a, because you can see it sliding under it. So we might need to consider the naming of some of these things, or how to handle it. Like, we could add code that if the fireball goes past a transition, it just gets deleted. Those are things that you could add to try to clean it up. But that does leave our fireball very functional at this point. So I'm going to take out these fireballs that are just hanging out in my world. And I am pretty happy with the way that my fireball has turned out. So if you want to skip the next video, the next few videos where we're going to make the fireball into a charge attack, you can. But those will be very interesting, and I'm also going to do some interesting UI type of stuff with that as well. So, but if you're feeling intimidated by the coding side of it, then those are skippable. And so with that, that is going to wrap up the second chapter of this project. The next chapter that we will do covers enemies. And so basically the first video on there, we're going to really start kind of updating the code of the player's attacks to be able to register hitting enemies and dealing damage to enemies. So thank you for watching, and thank you for surviving the longest video yet.